Greetings to all. Welcome back to this channel. So today we are going to discuss about a cell, and by the end of this video we should be able to define what a cell is. Number 2, give the characteristics of a cell. Number 3, state the cell theory. Number 4, explain the two types of cells. And lastly, should be able to give the differences and similarities between the two types of cells. So to begin with, a cell. When we talk about a cell is the smallest and functional unit of an organism. So for any organism to survive, it requires cells, because all biological functions occur within a cell. So a cell is the smallest and functional unit of an organism, or we can still define it as a smallest unit of life capable of carrying out biological functions. And of course, it is the smallest unit of any life and is sometimes called the building block of life. So, usually some organisms are unicellular and others are multicellular. For example, bacteria is unicellular, while humans are multicellular. So when we talk about multicellular, it is made up of very many cells, while bacteria is made up of a single cell. So from that, let's look at the general characteristics of a cell. Number 1, we should be able to appreciate that all cells need nutrition and oxygen. They require nutrition, of course, for survival, like glucose and oxygen. Number 2, they produce, or cell produces its own energy, and this energy is very important for its growth. Number 3, they undergo what we call repair. And number 4, they eliminate, or cells usually eliminate, metabolic waste. So this waste must leave the body to avoid toxicities. Number 5, they maintain the medium. And when we talk about the medium, we are meaning the environment for its survival. The other key point is that the cells show response to the entry of invaders. So when we have something that has invaded the body, like bacteria or toxic substances. The cell shows response by fighting these invaders. So we have what we call immune cells in the body which respond to anything foreign to the body. And the other one is that they reproduce by division. So usually there is cell division, so that we form daughter cell by mitosis, or we can form 4 daughter cells by meiosis. Though there are exceptions like neuronal cells, which you don't usually reproduce. From that, let's look at the cell theory. So when we talk about a theory is an idea intended to explain, basically to explain something based on general principles. So cell theory was crafted by 2 gentlemen. One was called M.J.S. Kennedy and Theodore Chon. And according to them, the cell theory states that all living things are made up of cells. In other words, for all living things to survive, they require cells. Number 2, according to their theory, a cell is a structural and functional unit of all living things. As we have said earlier, that all biological functions occur within a cell. Number 3, according to these 2 gentlemen, all cells came from pre-existing cells. In other words, spontaneous generation does not occur. So all cells came from pre-existing cells by division. Number 4, all cells are basically the same in chemical composition. So when you talk about water, sugars, and amino acids, all cells are the same. The other statement, according to their theory, is that all energy flow, e.g. metabolism of life, occurs within the cells. So that's all about the cell theory. Let's now look at the 2 types of cells. So the 2 types of cells, we basically have 1, prokaryote cells, prokaryotic cell, and eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells, basically they are cells whose DNA, the DNA is not aggregated within a well-defined nucleus, surrounded by membranous nuclear envelope. Those are prokaryotes. Eukaryotes, these are cells with a membrane-enveloped nucleus. So that is a eukaryotic cell. So you'll find a eukaryotic cell, of course, it has the mitochondrion, they have the ribosomes, membrane enclosed nucleus, and the nucleolus, of course, as well as the cell membrane. And the prokaryotes, they have a nucleoid, the capsule, the cell wall, flagella, also the cell membrane, and the ribosomes. So lastly, let's look at the differences and similarities. Differences and similarities between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So one is that prokaryotic cells, they lack distinct nucleus. but instead they have a nucleoid region. However, their counterparts, the eukaryotes, they have the distinct nucleus with double membrane. Then prokaryotes, they have what we call circular DNA without histone proteins. But their counterparts, they have linear DNA with histone proteins, and these histone proteins are very important in gene regulation. Then prokaryotes, number 3, their cytoplasm contain few structures, but their counterparts, the eukaryotes, the cytoplasm is highly structured. Then the other aspect is that prokaryotes, they're usually smaller in size. When you look at their size, they're about 0.1 to 10 micrometers. However, their counterparts, they are about 10 to 100 micrometers. Number 5, difference. Example of prokaryotes, we have bacteria, and example of eukaryotes, we have fungi, you have plants, you have animals. All those are eukaryotes. Of course, prokaryotes, the other key difference is that they don't have what we call mitotic spindles. However, prokaryotes, or rather eukaryotes, they have mitotic spindles. And these mitotic spindles are very important in the whole process of cell division. Of course, prokaryotes, they divide by binary fission only. However, their counterparts, they divide by mitosis. That's one. Mitosis, which you can call fission or budding, or they can also divide by meiosis, where we have gamete fission. Still, the other difference is that prokaryotes, their ribosomes are of 70 S, of 2 subunits of 50 and 30 S, while eukaryotes, the ribosomes are of 80 S, of 2 subunits of 60 and 40. We shall explain that in our next or subsequent presentations. Number 9, the cell wall is present, of course, made up of peptidoglycan. That is in prokaryotes, but in eukaryotes, it is absent in animal cell, but only in higher plants. That is the peptidoglycan. So the other difference is that, of course, prokaryotes are made up of single cell. In other words, only exist as a single cell, but prokaryotes, they may exist as single cells, or higher multicellular organisms with specialized cells. Of course, still in the prokaryotes, microtubules are absent, but in the eukaryotes, microtubules are present. Maybe the other difference you can talk about is that, of course, in the prokaryotes, chloroplast is totally absent. However, in eukaryotes, it is present in algae and plants. Then you can talk about RNA and protein synthesis. occur in the cytoplasm in prokaryotes, but in eukaryotes, RNA synthesis occurs inside the nucleus, while protein synthesis occurs in the cytoplasm. Then when you look at the similarities between the two, one is that both store information in genes made up of DNA. That's one of the similarities between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And both use proteins as their structural material. Then number 3 similarity is that both use ATP, adenosine triphosphate, as the energy for cells' internal processes. Number 4, both are enclosed by a cell membrane, composed of course of proteins and a double lipid layer that controls flow of materials into and out of the cell. And probably the last point is that they synthesize proteins in the cells, basically ribosomes, because we said they both have ribosomes. So they synthesize proteins in the cell ribosomes using information encoded in the DNA and mobilized by means of RNA. So those are the few similarities and differences between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Thank you very much for listening.